He said the thing, he said snips. 10 out of 10 series, cut to the credits. I'm messing, of course, but as it turns out, I might get to say it every week after all, because this episode was fucking incredible, and a profound move forward from the last, and in my opinion, truly a love letter to us Rebels and Clone Wars fans.
Beautiful.
I initially went into this one expecting Marrok to be the biggest reveal, as maybe Starkiller or fucking Ezra, but sweet Jesus was I not prepared for what we received in this. And the stark move forward for the plot of the series that leaves me prepared to forgive the plotting build we've had so far, as we seem set to move forward with everything we want from Rebels Season 5.
Comedy.
This one sees our intrepid heroes thrust into action, as where Huang is repairing the T6 from their descent down to Cetos last episode, Balin's forces catches up on them and quickly attacks him, leading to the ladies jumping in for the save and beginning to make their way through the forest where they are confronted by Marrok and Shin, the latter of which takes on Sabine alone while Ahsoka quickly dispatches of Marrok, and everyone's speculations revealing him to be conjured from Night Sister magic, so he just vanishes in a puff of smoke.
This is the best day of my life!
And while Shin is left with more competition this time, Ahsoka makes it to the map and is confronted by Baylan, where the two engage in a fierce competition of wills, and as the clock runs down for the coordinates confirmation, and just when it seems like Ahsoka stopped Elsbeth and co from receiving what they wanted to find Thrawn, Baylan bats her down with a barrage of strikes and throws her off the cliff edge as Sabine arrives threatening to destroy the map. And as we begin to wrap up with this one, Baylan convinces Sabine to hand the map back over to him, and he'll honour his word that no harm will come to her and that she will be reunited with Ezra.
Lies. Oh, lies!
She chooses to return the map, and the calculations are complete with Baylan destroying it so that no one can follow them, and they return to Elsbeth with Sabine in tow.
Traitor!
Right as Hera and her forces arrive to offer support for our heroes, but the group get caught amid the enemy's takeoff into hyperspace, which leaves Hera concerned and a couple of their ships destroyed. While back on the planet's surface, we see a quick transition from the waves of Cetos to the past of the world between worlds, and our tiny little minds are blown where Ahsoka is confronted by her former master, Anakin Skywalker.
Bring it on.
Now, when we as the fans talk about fan servicing and not just writing people in for nostalgia bait, this in my mind is what we mean. It is undeniable that we've moved forward with the plot at this point, and no doubt there will be a corner of naysayers who haven't a Scooby-Doo what's happening here, and that's on them quite frankly, but right here you've got an animated fanatic that loves this inclusion and everything around it.
Good job.
There is much to take from this episode that provides a feast of rooted contextual elements, small mentions that offer greater insight to our characters' mindsets, tailored dialogue reflecting what fans were interested to hear, high-octane action that is representative of our characters' capabilities, and this one possesses an atmosphere that is heavy and marred whilst feeling weighted and involved, making me proud to feel like a Star Wars fan once again. Filoni may fuck up occasionally for sure, but when he does something right and it clicks into place, it demonstrates the man's capability of entertaining, from his writing to his creativity and certainly to his subversions.
You're goddamn right.
Which leads me to start with possibly the weakest portion of this episode, and that was the reveal of Marrok. A moment that was equally surprising as it was frustrating. Frustrating for the simple fact that I started to believe in the hype surrounding the potential of his identity, only for that to go up in literal smoke. Which got a chuckle out of me in the moment, and did come as a surprise as he was essentially a walking corpse. But the possibility of having a plot twist like Barriss, Ezra, or even Starkiller was tantalising, but in all honesty would never have worked in Filoni's style of writing. He tends to make logical moves that drop your jaw, not empty inclusions that would work for a second until you start to think about it too long. I don't hate this at all personally, as I think it makes perfect sense given Elsbeth's lineage and what we saw in the Clone Wars with resurrected corpses used against Grievous during the fight on Dathomir. But I think this interestingly shows us the depth of Elsbeth's power, where she's able to keep a connection alive with a corpse far away from Dathomir, where we saw in Clone Wars needed old Dar to keep the spark going for the zombies until Grievous killed her and all the corpses stopped moving. Though I do have a question now, and that is, what could Marrok have been? Is it possible at all that the 8th brother's body from Rebels was resurrected, as the design is very reminiscent of him and could have been modified somewhat using Night Sister magic, as we saw with Maul and Savage in Clone Wars, or could it have simply been a Night Brother? If he was the latter, this could explain his helmet shape to account for the horns, but makes sense as well, as we saw Night Sister Merrin in Jedi Fallen Order manipulate Night Brothers in a similar manner.
It all makes sense now.
Who knows, but either way you look at this, we got some awesome fight sequences with him, so thanks Marrok. However, I digress. The first point of discussion for me that comes from this episode is the reveal of Sabine's family somehow dying between the events of Rebels' conclusion to now. My theory, at least, is Ursa, Ulrich, and Tristan succumb to the effects of the Great Purge, or specifically the Night of 1,000 Tears. Something I never considered before, as Sabine's family lived on Cronus, a planet within the Mandalore sector but a good flight away from the home world. But if the clans united to take on the Empire during its invasion of the system, then it's likely they were called to action and sadly were hit within the massacre. But this does provide a little more substance behind why Sabine is so determined to find Ezra, believing him to be the last of her family that's out in the galaxy, where before she might have sought a sisterhood with Ahsoka as much as a mentor, but Ahsoka walked away from her, which Baylan implies led to the death of her family because Ahsoka wouldn't trust her to support it. And lest we forget as well that Hera and Zeb are also caught up in their own responsibilities to the New Republic, meaning that Sabine was left with nothing, informing us of why she's such a recluse at the start of this season. This is honestly the type of information I dearly needed to really invest in this version of the character, and now I feel a little more comfortable with seeing this depiction of her, where before she just felt unnecessarily cold and almost unyielding, but as it turns out, she's just lonely. Moving back a bit though, Baylan was a force to be reckoned with in this one, and clearly a manipulator in his own right who does his research when mentioning Sabine's family, Ahsoka's former master, and the fact that he knew Anakin was Vader. The late Ray Stevenson does a fantastic job here presenting the character of Skoll as an intelligent, imposing figure, who is both conflicted and uncompromising in his mission, but is composed with strong moral values and skills that clearly rivaled Ahsoka. His presence in this is clearly a precursor to Thrawn, and opening the season with him and Hati was a smart play, as it conveys the tone of the series and the stakes involved. Skoll till now has expressed a sign of regret for having to even engage Ahsoka, let alone any other Jedi, despite his position in the Force and the use of it, which shows that he's not simply a dark sider, but one who sees the use of both the light and dark and never aligns with either, understanding that neither is the true path. This alone makes him a fascinating inclusion at this point in the timeline, given pipes are still brewing out there and Luke is trying to rebuild the Order, so he's another display of power that isn't commonly seen. However, once he saw the map and the possibility of gaining what he seeks, that hesitation went away for a spell as he took on our girl with such viciousness and direction. Every strike was calculated, willing and intentional, and whilst there were moments that he clearly improvised, his proficiency stood out as a master swordsman. And what's even more compelling is he never got angry during this. Even though Ahsoka pushed his buttons on more than one occasion, he stayed true to form, collected and used his words to throw her off and eventually sway Sabine, showing us that he has a mastery over modern moves. What's fascinating with Skoll as well is I don't believe his quest for power stems from hunger. I think for him it comes from a deeper interest and connection, like maybe obtaining something outside of the galaxy that no one else would think to consider. His moral positioning in this is something else to consider too going forward, as I feel it could play into the closing act of the series, where once they find Thrawn and all Blue Balls sees that Sabine is with him, he might have other plans for her following their last encounter, where either he could take her off the scoreboard or maybe he'd use her to lure Ezra out. The list of potentials for his character to go on, but it leaves me excited to see how his story progresses and ultimately will conclude given the passing of Ray Stevenson. Now we move on to the biggest talking point of this week's edition, in the return of the World Between Worlds and the revelation of Anakin being present outside of his own timeline, or possibly as a ghost or otherwise.
Stop letting him make you realize stuff.
These are huge, as firstly, the World Between Worlds has only been depicted once before in Star Wars in Rebels' final season underneath the Jedi Temple on Lothal, that once connected by Ezra unlocked a portal that he entered, granting him access to the events that have unfolded in this timeline from the prequels to the sequels, and it was from here that he witnessed the fight between Ahsoka and Vader on Malachor, where as Vader was about to make the killing blow, Ezra reached through and pulled Ahsoka out of that moment in time.
Holy shit.
And following the success in this moment, Ezra was convinced that he could save Kanan Jarrus from his death before, but Ahsoka reminds him that if he does so, it will take Ezra out as well. And before leaving this realm, Palpatine tried using Sith alchemy to access the World Between Worlds by latching onto Ahsoka and Ezra to pull him through, as he didn't possess the necessary knowledge to gain access alone. The pair managed to escape from his grasp, with Ahsoka returning to her point in time with the promise of finding Ezra when she gets back. And our young Jedi returned to the present day to deal with Thrawn, but before leaving the grounds of the temple, the lads shut down the access to the realm, making it seemingly impossible to uncover again.
Hey, did you know that carrots are good for your eyesight?
You lied to me.
Yet, here we are, and Ahsoka has arrived back inside of it once more. Now, this dredges up a lot of questions for sure about how this could even happen and why. A Skoll struck her off the cliff edge into the waves, then destroyed the star map, so I don't know if the two are possibly connected, or in that moment Ahsoka connected so deeply with the Force that she unlocked a portal herself. I don't know, and personally I'm not willing to question it too deeply just yet, in case the answer lays in next week's installment, but for now, I'm just excited to be back in this ethereal plane and see it actualized in live action.
And I gotta tell you, it was perfect.
You could absolutely say that this is a cheap trick around writing anything more linear, however this grants us two things. Firstly, a possible assortment of cameos, but secondly, a quicker means to progress the story, as Ahsoka would simply need to find the right portal to take her to Sabine, Ezra and Thrawn, rather than spend the next 2 to 3 episodes trying to collect the parts that she'd need to be able to follow them through hyperspace. Plus we have the fact that the map no longer exists, so how she would even find them is beyond me. There's possibly another way, but it would feel more contrived and convenient than this if she just knew about it and didn't do it before.
No. He's got a point.
That aside though, the return to this realm is huge, but equally if not more shocking is the return of her master, Anakin Skywalker. A visual I didn't expect to see as he stands before her in full getup from Revenge of the Sith with what I think is Vader's saber on his hip. Though I can't be sure, so don't quote me on that. This was a moment of catharsis for fans of the prequel content who dreamed of seeing Hayden's Anakin and Ahsoka share the screen just once, and now here we are.
Are you crying? Am I crying? No, I'm not crying. You're crying.
I won't lie, I teared up a little bit hearing the hello snips and witnessing such a visual, but you remove my excitement from this. What is actually happening here? Is Anakin a ghost, or is he there? Honestly, where I'd find issue with this is if he was actually present, as it was established in Rebels that you need to interact with the moment to draw someone or something from it, and now if anyone can just walk in and out of this realm like an out-of-time Anakin, then that would fly directly in the face of Filoni's writing, but I doubt that would be the case. The most likely avenue for this is that he is in fact a ghost, and that through the Force and its connection with the world between worlds, this could strengthen his presence to be almost tangible. But there is another possibility we shouldn't rule out as well, which draws back to my thought around Vader's saber on his hip a second ago, where if you have closed captions on the episode, or good set of ears, the closing theme for this is Vader's, making me wonder, is this some kind of battle of wills for Ahsoka or a test from the Force, or could it be a trick of some kind? Filoni is very intentional with his signals in Star Wars, and the use of musical motifs wouldn't have been an accident here. I don't want to sour on such a moment with skepticism, but I can't help but be wary of this appearance, and there's every chance I could be overthinking it, and he could just be coming in her hour of need to help her as the mentor that he once was. And if he is here to support Ahsoka, could he provide her with the necessary direction that she lost before, which might have led to Sabine's training being dropped and offer the boot needed to continue with her and believe that the Jedi would be possible again. Anakin was always unorthodox, and Huang even calls that out, so perhaps a new age is upon us and it just starts from a little chat with the old guard. He could inform her of maybe a different approach or encourage her to pursue a new path with training someone who isn't a Force sensitive, thereby delivering on what Ahsoka had discussed with Huang before about a new age for the Jedi. I wonder as well that if Anakin was who Ahsoka subconsciously called on in that moment, could it be a reflection of her inner turmoil for feeling she'd failed as an apprentice and a master, seeing how much more aggressive she was throughout this one and how much more malicious her maneuvers were in trying to protect Sabine? Who knows, but either way, just to have Hayden back is awesome, and I'm itching to see what's next, and now with the announcement of a special screening for episode 5, that means that something big is about to go down. There is much to take away from this one episode as it delivers on the fast-paced, easygoing, action-heavy adventures of old that Filoni is best known for.
I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them.
The fight sequences were fantastic, filled with quirks and movements that inform us of their respective headspaces right now, as well as convey the stories through their intentions and directions. Given that Ahsoka and Skoll's movements were refined with fury, while Sabine and Shin were energetic and erratic, filled with passion and rage. And I can't quite tell, but is Shin battling something within her right now, as she seemed willing to follow her master's instructions, but at times appears almost bloodthirsty. The reintroduction of the world between worlds seems to be the path forward to access another galaxy now and push the story to Act 3. And regarding Hera's involvement, I can only imagine that Sabine or Ahsoka will get the coordinates to her and possibly call upon the Pearl Girl to get her out there. Huang battling the HKs was worth the price of admission, with the puppetry and CG being nearly seamless, and you can tell that this was something that Filoni wanted to perfect, given the consideration he put in to even bring this character back again. Everyone felt like they stepped up their game this week in terms of acting. Balin was performed expertly by Rey, presenting the most credible performance of the show yet, with Rosario displaying more emotion than I've seen from her so far, and Natasha is working her way into my heart as Sabine, and lest we forget, David Tennant once again over-delivered as Huang. This one did well on the themes and answered the title rather fittingly, as the focus was on fallen Jedis, with Skoll, Hattie, Sabine, Ahsoka, and Anakin all representative of that fact. And incredibly, we get to explore a new galaxy entirely next week, which leaves many options open for who and what you could include. But overall, I loved this episode, as it is easily the best of the season for me, making for a remarkable live-action installment that stands above most of the other content we've had so far, and one can only sit and wait as Filoni seems set to blow our tiny minds as we close out on this journey with Ahsoka and friends once and for all. That's all I've got for this week though. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe for the rest of my coverage on Ahsoka, and until next week everyone, take care, and may the Force be with you.